Let's get ready to rumble!
Hello, and welcome to Netflix vs. Cinema, the podcast that is one light this week. My name is Tosin. I am your host up in Coventry near the Midlands. It's the other way around. And joining me on the Isle of Wight today is Sharon.
Hello.
And unfortunately, we do not have a Shaun this week to say a hiya because Shaun has, what was it? He's recently been taken into the hospital with a perforated appendix.
Perforated appendix, yes.
Which came on all of a sudden. I think we recorded the podcast 2 weeks ago. He seemed to be okay for a while, but then a couple of days later, next thing we know, Shaun sent us a picture on our WhatsApp group of him in a hospital gown, and we're like, what? And we saw a picture that I hadn't seen the whole day because I was busy doing stuff. And then I got to the end of the day, picked up my phone, and I was like, oh, what's going on? But Sharon, you've had a chance to speak to Shaun in his hospital.
Yes.
And so give us a Shaun report. How's he doing?
Yeah. So as you say, last week he got taken poorly with stomach pain. So went into the hospital and they said you've got a perforated appendix and it's coming out this afternoon. So he went in, had the op, and I went to see him the day after. I went up to the hospital and visited him, and he was feeling a bit droopy, but they were saying they're just checking his bloods and they're seeing how he is. And then as the weekend progressed, basically they haven't liked his blood work, so he's still been a bit poorly. But I spoke to him on the phone today, and he said for the first time he's beginning to feel better.
Oh, that's good.
And I took him some books along because he did. First of all, he texted me saying, "I'm in hospital. I'm going to be here for at least the weekend." This was last weekend.
Yeah.
He said, "Oh, can you bring me a couple of books? And then I might, when I feel like it, I might do some reading." So I took him some books, and today he said, "You know what? I might actually get around to picking up those books." Because he's just, he has been a bit of a poorly boy. But today he said he was beginning to feel better. He ate for the first time today.
Oh, nice.
And he's been able to drink something for the first time today.
Oh.
Otherwise, he's all been on drips and on everything else. So he's resigned to the fact that he may be in there for another weekend.
Yeah.
But he was definitely feeling a bit brighter.
Yeah. So Shaun, if you're listening to this, we just want to say, get well soon. You are missed, and we will do our very best to make sure that what this particular episode of the podcast is missing in excitement and puppy dog sort of excitement about movies, we'll make up for with coherence. So we will do our best to try and do that. I mean, it will not make up for it, but we'll do our best to try that.
We'll have a go.
So the last time we were on here, we were talking. I had a massive rant about how greedy film studios are and how they're refusing to accept that they have to make less money, which has led to things like the closing of Cineworld cinemas, the entire Cineworld cinemas and picture house chain in the UK indefinitely. We still have Odeon going on weekends and half term. Throughout the Odeon close to me is open throughout half term, and that meant that on the Isle of Wight, where you and Shaun live, we were going to have pretty much no films. That was it for the rest of 2020. No films, and the only way we could see anything is if you managed to go over to another cinema, which is the Commodore Cinema on the other side of the island in Ryde. Shaun said
it's an independent.
At independent cinema. Shaun said that he didn't reckon that he would do it. But today, you actually decided to, take your courage to the sticking place and go check out the Commodore, didn't you?
I did. Yeah, I went there this afternoon. It was, I didn't have a lot of choices about the film times. It was 1 o'clock or 3 o'clock. And it was like, take your pick. So I went it was in the afternoon.
Yeah, the thing is, at the moment, I guess that's the case. It's like, hey, you want to see films in cinema? Yeah, then this is the time. What? It's like, what are you going to do? Whinge?
Yeah, they're a little independent. They have 3 screens, and the cinema's been there for 100 years or more. So it's quite a vintage old, and the seats are compared to what you're used to in like a multiplex or in one of these multinational chains or whatever they are. The seats are like half the size that you're probably used to. So when you're in, and then and even though I'm 5 foot tall, my knees were touching the seat in front.
Oh wow! Oh good lord!
And so if I sat up bolt upright, I had a little bit of knee room. But if I sort of relaxed slightly, I could feel my knees touching the
Okay, now this now it is beginning, because I've been in that cinema once, and it's beginning to become clear to me why Shaun doesn't like that cinema, because Shaun is over 6 foot.
Yeah, and he's a lounger. When he's in the cinema, he may start, when I've been in the cinema with him, he may start sat up, arms on the arms of the chair, and as he gets more relaxed, he slowly sinks. And so he'll be, by the time the film's halfway through, I may just sort of, the top of his head will be level with like an elbow, so he will be like proper recumbent.
Yeah.
So he does like to be on the front row where he more or less can be fully stretched out.
Yeah.
So I can understand that he would not like to be
in the Commodore.
The Commodore.
All
Saying
right.
that, it was the experience was for me it was fine.
Okay. All right.
The only quibble I had.
Yeah, the only quibble you had
was we were given numbered seats, bearing in mind we are in the days of COVID and in the days of social distancing.
Yep.
And my seat I chose it online beforehand, and I made sure there was no one else in my row.
Yep.
There was a bit of space around me. I got out there, and my row was full except for my seat. They'd sold every single ticket in my row, and I said, my seat is there, but I'm not going to climb over 3 people to get to it and then sit in between 2 strangers when there was no gap in between. So I actually sat in a different row altogether, and I thought, if someone asks me to move, I'll move later, but I'm not climbing over 3 strangers to sit between another set of strangers. Yeah,
in the days of COVID, the whole sort of like squeezing past people while presenting your bum in their face, that's like the opposite of what we're supposed to be doing right now.
This just not going to happen. And they all had their packets of like pick and mix and their popcorn as well. I'm thinking, there's no way am I going to be sitting in between 2 strangers while you're eating pick and mix and popcorn.
Okay. Just before we go, because I know I'm really, really terrible at this, but for anybody who might be listening to this for the very, very, very first time, you might be wondering, Netflix Cinema, what does it do? We try and do what it says in the tin. Now, usually in days where there isn't a pandemic on, where one of us isn't in a hospital, where one of us hasn't decided to go become a dad and therefore not make it to the cinema for a while, in those days, in those halcyon days, what we would do is we would go to the cinema each week and we would see usually about 3 films. 3 films in the cinema. We would watch 3 films at home on Netflix or other streaming platforms, and then we would come back and we would rate them all out of 5, and we would say, this is who's won this week. Out of 5, this is where money has been better spent this week. Either Netflix or cinema, hence the title. So that's what we usually do. So at the moment, we are still figuring out exactly what we're going to be left with when it comes to the film watching landscape, and it changes week to week. So it's a bit of a potluck. It's a lucky dip. You see what you get. You see what you get when you go to the cinema. It's like, was there actually a cinema open this week? Then we might make it anywhere. So that's what usually happens on the show. So now we are going to kick off with cinema, and we're going to find out what film it is that Sharon got to see at the Commodore Cinema in Ryde. But before we got there, because I know the last time we were really, really kind of despairing about the state of cinema, and we were despairing as to whether cinema was going to survive this and what they're going to be in. Like, you went to a cinema that was so packed that you were worried about getting close to other people, or had enough people in it for you to get. So how many people were in this cinema when you went there?
It was not full because I was in a row that I managed to find a row that was empty, but I would say there were 30 plus people in there.
All right.
A small screening in Ryde. A lot of families. So it was. I'm trying to think number wise.
Yeah, because it's half term, isn't it?
It's half term. So 30 plus. It could even be as many as 50 people in there, because there's a small screen anyway. The seats are 5 and 5, and so yeah, we could have definitely over 30, but I would say probably around about between 30 and 50 in there.
What did you think the capacity of that screen was?
The capacity is probably 120.
Oh, no. Now, that sounds like a normal screening to me.
Yeah.
Like those numbers sound... I have been, even before COVID, I have been in cinemas watching films, not even in the middle of the day, where there's fewer people than that watching the film. So Okay, so no.
I think they're going to be doing all right out of this, the Commodore ride, because people still want to go to the cinema, and so they were showing 5 films today. In a normal week, they would normally only show sort of 2 or 3, but they had 5 films on,
Oh wow!
and a lot of the films that would be the smaller releases. But yeah, there were people in the foyer as I was coming out waiting to go into the next film, so they were ticking over.
All right, so all the film studio heads who are listening, who we know obviously listen to us, all the film studio heads, you see, there is an appetite for it. People will brave things. They will wear their masks. They will go to the cinema. So start releasing films. although
play your part.
Yeah, play your part. Although we'll see what happens with all this tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 lockdown, mini lockdown, localized lockdown. I can't believe it's not a lockdown. All the different versions. Oh, now that's what I call a lockdown. So all the different versions of a lockdown.
On the island, I think we're in the lowest tier. I think we probably got one of the lowest rates in the country from what I've seen.
I would hope so.
Yeah.
Because I feel like on the island, even if you had a COVID outbreak, I feel it would burn itself out really, really quickly. Those who survive will survive, and those who die will die, and then that'll be it.
Well, I think we had a bad month in October, but we've had 113 cases on the island in October. But I think when you compare that to anywhere else in the country, that's low. I mean, we only had 2 cases in the whole of July. But
130
so
cases.
compared to July, it's not good.
That's 0.01%.
Yeah.
Of the population of the island, I think.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people are still not going out at all. A lot of the elderly folk are not going out at all.
Yeah.
So they're still shielding rigorously.
Well,
so, yeah,
if you would like a lovely place, so if you like a lovely place to wait out the pandemic in, the Isle of Wight. Could we suggest the Isle of Wight, especially the West Wight? Nobody will come anywhere near you.
Yeah, you can isolate to your heart's content. Yeah.
All right, cool. So, okay, enough of this. So we know that there is some hope for cinema. This is the only film any one of us has seen in the cinema this week. What was it? So, what film did you get to see, and what did you think about it?
I went to see The Secret Garden, which is the latest adaptation of the novel by Frances Hodgson Burnett, and it's one of those films that they're simultaneously releasing it at selected cinemas, those they can find, and I think it's on Sky Cinema. You can pay to watch it on Sky, I believe, which I don't pay for films on Sky.
Yep.
So I thought I'd go to the cinema to see it. Well, and yes, as an adaptation, a brief summary of the story. The story is, the book is set in the turn of the century India. There's a young girl, Mary, who has grown up with her parents in British Raj, India. There's a cholera pandemic, and her parents get killed of cholera. They die.
Yeah.
And the servants flee, and basically she's left alone in the house in India. And then after her being on her own for a couple of weeks, sort of eating scraps and drinking puddles and stuff, she is found, and then she's sent to her only living relative, which is an uncle who lives in this isolated manor in the moors. And so far the same in England,
yeah.
On the moors in England. And there she lives with her uncle who doesn't know her at all. And it's a big rambling estate on the edge of the northern Yorkshire moors.
Yeah.
And while she's there, they basically say, don't poke around. You haven't got a governess, you haven't gone to school, but just keep out of our way, and we'll give you your meals, we'll feed you, but get out of the way.
Yeah.
And so she starts exploring the gardens, and she comes across this hidden garden, and magical things start to happen. As the garden blossoms, so does she. And whilst she's exploring the gardens and exploring, this sort of new freedom that she's found, she makes a couple of friends. One of them is a local boy called Dickon, who is a little bit fey. So he's one of his children who sort of wanders the moors, and he has more in common with animals and birds than he does with people.
Yep.
And the other person she meets is her cousin Colin, who she didn't know existed, but he has been convinced all his life that he is an invalid and he's going to die young. And that he believes he can't walk, that he's got a hunch that he's deformed, and that he's, everything is potentially dangerous to him.
Yep.
So Mary meets her cousin Colin, and eventually by telling him how wonderful it is in her garden. She persuades him to come outside for the first time in his childhood. And then the magic of the garden begins to have its effect on him as well.
All right.
So that is the story. The only differences between the book and the film is this film, they've changed the time period from turn of the century British Raj to 1947 partition in India. So they've jumped forward about 40 years.
Yep.
So it's set in 1947, so it's post World War.
Mm-hmm.
So so when their parents still die of cholera, Mary Lennox is left alone in the house, but it's because of the disruption of partition that she isn't found initially.
Oh yeah.
There's so much going on that she sort of falls through the cracks.
Yeah.
And then they send her home on a ship where they're repatriating a lot of the British subjects who are living in India, who are now no longer welcome. So she's part of this sort of refugee convoy that is sort of heading back to Britain after the Second World War.
All right.
So the change of date makes a subtle difference in the storytelling, because again, in the first book, it's all about innocence and the sort of the rejuvenation of nature.
Yep.
And what the writer didn't know then, but what we know, was that the First World War is looming.
Yeah.
Within 10 years of this book, these children are going to be plunged into the First World War. So that casts a shadow over the innocence of the book. So I can understand that by moving it after the wars, this sort of sense of hope and renewing and rejuvenation is a bit more hopeful. You don't suddenly have the shadow of a war that the writer didn't know was coming, but we knew was coming.
Yeah.
You don't have that shadow looming over the story, so it sort of frees it a little bit of that sort of foreshadowing.
Yeah.
But yes, it's a story of innocence and youth and how nature can be rejuvenating.
Yeah. So with this, I mean, obviously we there's times when we become cliches of ourselves. So with you, if it's something that used to be a book and it's now a film, Sharon will watch it. Sharon will watch it. If it's animated, Tosin will watch it. If it's a Western, Shaun will watch it and talk about how it's not as good as The Wild Bunch. So it's like, so obviously this is right up your alley. But what did you think about the film as itself, as a film?
A film as itself, yeah, I enjoyed it. I mean, again, when you go into a film, sometimes you can't help but compare it to other films you've seen or other television versions you've seen. But so taking all that away, watching it as it's in its own entirety, I think it was done really charmingly. Mary Lennox, I can't help but refer to the book. She's called Mary quite contrary in the book.
Oh, that's where that comes from.
Well, no, but it isn't. But the children tease her with that because where she's sort of spiky and a bit cross all the time, all the other children just nickname her Mary quite contrary. And so Mary Lennox has to be unlikable at the beginning of the book, of the film. She has to be this child who she feels that her parents don't love her. Mm-hmm. And so she reacts by being just an unpleasant little girl. Yeah. And so she is. And then you see that by exploring the grounds, by making friends with a robin and making friends with a stray dog, it draws out the best of her. And so as a child, you're watching it, you're thinking, yes, children do get angry and they are like, sometimes. So it's you can identify, because too often in film, children are sickly sweet. I don't think they mean them to be, but they can become sickly sweet. And she's not. She's a bit like, ugh. So the gardens were beautiful. Dickon was sort of suitably, he wasn't quite so fey as other Dickens I've seen, but he was one of these children who communicates with animals and birds. And Colin was suitably, I'm going to die, so you have to do what I say. And Mary Lennox like, I don't. And I won't. So you have that contrast between these three children. So to me, it worked well. I enjoyed it. I thought it was really beautifully filmed. The set of the house was suitably daunting for a child who's been grown up in India. The landscape was suitably alien. It's not exotic in a way that you would expect. There's not tigers lurking in those long grasses. There's robins and woodlice and a shaggy dog. So it was to me, it was charmingly done, and I enjoyed it.
All right, and how many stars would you give it?
So for me, I would give it a 4-star review.
Oh, 4-star of that's not bad for a modern adaptation of something that you quite like. 4 stars, not bad. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, they did vary from the book a lot, but that didn't matter in this context. You separate it from the book, and it was fine. It was fine.
All right, so 4 stars. Cinema. You might be a bit peedly at the moment. You might be a bit weak. You might be on your last legs, but you're still punching. You're still coming out.
Still deliver. You can still deliver.
Still coming out punching. And so that is our cinema offer for this week. And we have 2 things from Netflix. I think they're both on Netflix this week. And I think I will take. Actually, the second thing that you watched is another adaptation of a well-loved book, which is on Netflix this week, and we will get to that. It is both a lovingly adapted. It's both a well-publicized. No, was celebrated is what I'm looking for. A well-celebrated book. It's both a well-celebrated book and also a well-celebrated film. Has already been made from this, and somebody decided to go back and try and make a modern version of it. Let's see. We'll see how they did in a second. But first, I'm going to talk about Schitt's Creek. Now,
I've seen the thumbnails, but I've not watched it.
Yeah, now Schitt's Creek is a show that has hit the headlines recently because of the Emmys, or the Pandemies as they were called this year. The Schitt's Creek won like everything when it came to comedy. It won the best comedy, it won the best actor, actress, supporting actress, director. It swept the board. And Schitt's Creek was a show that I started watching a couple of years ago. I started watching season 1 because it showed up on Netflix. I thought 2 things. Oh, that's a funny title because it's you can see what they've done there because it's Schitt is spelt Schitt.
Yeah.
And
I'm glad you said that because I'd be like, how would I say that? I'd have to do it like with a French accent or something. And go, it's.
You
don't pronounce the yes at all.
The funny thing is that it is actually a legitimate name. There are people with this name because when this show was being made, as you can see, I've done the usual thing. I've watched the show, then I've gone on a Wikipedia rabbit hole just to find out a little bit more. So when this show was being made, the network executives wanted them to change the name of the show, and they were like, "No, you can't have the name of that show. You cannot call the show that." And so they had to go and find people who were legitimately called. Who legitimately had the last name Schitt. So they said, look, it is an actual name. Get over yourselves. So what you're saying that these people's name is profane or it can't be. No, it's their name. It's what it is. So and so it swept the board. And I started watching this a couple of years ago. I watched a couple of episodes. I think I got probably about 3 episodes in, and I went, oh well, yeah, well, I essentially was like, oh, it's all right, but it's a bit of a curio because A, the title I thought was funny, B, it has Eugene Levy in it and Catherine O'Hara, and I will watch those people in anything, but I thought, oh, it's not that big a deal, and I just stopped watching it, and then all of a sudden, a couple of years later, I'd totally forgotten about this show. Like I expected it to be a 1-season show, and it just totally forgotten about it. It even stopped coming up on my continue watching on Netflix list. It stopped, and then all of a sudden, I hear it's winning all these Emmys, and it's done 6 seasons. I'm like, what? It did 6 seasons. So I decided to go back and start watching this and see, okay, exactly what was it that I missed? What was it that was so great about this show that I missed the first time round? And I think I started 2 weeks ago. I've watched all 6 seasons. So,
wow.
Yeah. I've watched all 6. It's an easy watch. Schitt's Creek is a very easy watch. And the basic idea behind it is you have a family, the Rose family, and they live in New York. They are big moguls. The father has he has like this, essentially they're the kind of people who go to the Met Gala and they have big, massive Christmas parties that celebrities and the hoi polloi and the glitterati of New York come round to. And in the first episode, you find out that the business manager has absconded with all of their money. Like he's taken everything. So they go from being right at the height of rich, essentially American royalty, if you could call it, to being flat broke. and they have all the assets have to be sold off. So in the first episode, they're coming to the mansion and they're taking everything, and the only things they can keep is what they're wearing on themselves. So you can see the mother, played by Catherine O'Hara, called Moira Rose, wearing all of her jewelry and going, no, my wigs, leave my wigs, and all that. And it goes to explain to them that the only asset that they have left is a town. And they never tell you where this town is. They never tell you where this town is. But they tell that the only asset that they have left is a town that the father bought for the son as a joke because he thought the name was funny. And that town is Schitt's Creek. So that's the only place that they can go. So they go because they've lost everything that they have. They've lost their houses, their cars, their money. And they show up in this town. And they meet the mayor. And it's kind of like, the whole almost fish out of water thing, or somebody from the city goes to a rural town, and it becomes that kind of comedy. They end up living in the motel because the mayor goes, "Oh, you own the town. Well, we'll put you up in the motel. It's the only place they could stay." And it becomes this thing about these people. Apparently, because the show was created by Dan Levy, who is Eugene Levy's son, and it's great. And his whole thing, his idea for the show was, what would happen if the Kardashians lost all their money? That was his thing. It was like, what would happen if the Kardashians lost all their money? So you have the different characters. You have the father, who was Johnny Rose, who built this business. You have Moira Rose, who is an actress. She used to be on a soap opera, but she's older now. She's out of the limelight. You have the son, who is David Rose, who is kind of like spoiled brats, little kind of. It's like, is he gay? Isn't he? We don't really know, and they play a lot with that throughout the whole show. And you have the daughter Alexis, who is essentially Paris Hilton, and it's about them being in this small town and what goes on. And as a comedy, I don't think it is laugh out loud funny, but it's one of these shows that as you go through, like, essentially, especially with Netflix's play next episode, you will burn through the episodes before you realize what's going on.
Really hard to get out sometimes, isn't it? It's like
it is.
As soon as an episode starts, you're like, oh no, it started.
You're like, oh, okay.
That's another half an hour gone, or another hour gone.
I will just submit. I will submit and just lie here and let it wash over me.
Think, oh, that's because, like, just don't look. Oh no, I've looked. That's it.
Yeah.
I've got to watch it now.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where I think it's a show that isn't so much about the situation or anything as it is about the characters, and it's about the characters, and it's about what losing all their money does to them, and it's about what being in this small town does to them, and in the best way possible. Because I understand that saying this might sound like the just want to throw up right now. And in the best way possible, it's about how they end up becoming better people.
Oh.
Yeah, it's about how they end up becoming better people.
I don't mind corny.
Yeah, it could be corny. It could be corny, but the genius, and I use the genius of Schitt's Creek is making that journey that they go through. The genius of it is making it seem normal and making it seem right and making it not feel massively corny, so that these people, even though when they show up, they are all varying levels of terrible. So like you're still saying, oh, I wonder what happens. And there is a little bit of, I know that how they said in the TV show Seinfeld, they had a rule. They said no hugging, no learning. That these people will not learn anything. They will remain the same all the way through. And I think Schitt's Creek, the final season, which is season 6, by the time you get there, I think it won all these accolades, not because it's laugh out loud funny, because it actually ends up being a little bit of a comedy drama. But I think it's because of the way it actually tackles things. Because I know it has a massive following. It has a massive following in the LGBTQ because of the way it portrays the character of David. Because the character of David, they have this whole talk. They have this speech that he gives in the first season where he talks about he talks about, someone says, is using that euphemism, like I'm really into red wine, but I thought you were into white wine. And he goes, oh, I like red and I like wine. It's like, and sometimes I like rosés, and sometimes those. And he goes, "I'm into the wine, not into the label." And yeah, and so because of the way he puts it, I think and he comes across as okay. There's a lot of times when you can see shows that are made with, be it an LGBTQ character in it, or let's say a character that somehow has been oppressed in some way. It could be a black character. It could be like a woman who's a leader, and everything that they do in it is really about trying to tell you why this person is so right and why you are wrong for not wanting this to be here. And if you don't think this way, then you're a terrible, terrible, terrible person. And I think Schitt's Creek doesn't do that. It just shows these people and shows how they're living their lives and shows how it shows those sort of character. Well, David is pretty much the main character of the show. He isn't really, but he is kind of, he's kind of the main character. And I just think that it's a show that catches you off guard with some really, really heartfelt moments. It catches you off guard with, there's a bit in it where they do things like there's in one of the seasons the whole thing is that they're trying to put on a production of Cabaret. And they have bits where they show you the production of Cabaret that makes you go, you know what, I want to watch that production of Cabaret. Like they come on and they do the opening number, you know, the welcome and bienvenue, welcome, yeah. And they show you that, and you're like, oh my god, that's actually really good.
That's really.
And then one of the actress who plays Stevie Budd, who's the owner of the motel that they end up staying at, who is played by an actress called Emily Hampshire. She delivers an amazing rendition of Maybe This Time from Cabaret, which just... Oh,
that's a brilliant song.
It's a
fantastic song.
Brilliant song. And she does it a different way from... Like, the way it's done, it's talking as much about the character of Stevie as it is about the character of... What's her name in Cabaret?
Sally Bowles.
Yes.
Sally Bowles.
I'm talking about the character Sally Bowles. And she doesn't do the Liza Minnelli belt it out thing. She does...
No.
She does it more. It's more kind of like almost like a spoken thing, but it so works. So works, and so I really, really like the show. I really like the way it goes about doing things. I really like the way about how it says almost kind of like this is the way we think the world should be. It presents terrible characters, and it presents terrible characters like and after a while, it just makes you think, you know what, Schitt's Creek might be an alright place to hang out. And so I would give the show, and this is all 6 seasons because I've seen all of them, 4 stars. 4 stars.
Wow.
Schitt's Creek is really good. As to whether it deserved all the Emmys, I think by the time it got to the 6th season, there was just so much goodwill about the show that people didn't care if it was funny. They just thought there was just so much goodwill and just wanted to see good things happen for these characters, which is, considering where they started out, is quite an achievement. Right, cool. And now, after I finished waxing whatever about Schitt's Creek, it's now time to go to that film we're talking about that you saw on Netflix that was a celebrated book, got turned into a celebrated film made by Alfred Hitchcock, no less. And then Ben Wheatley decides, you know what, I'm going to dip my wicket and I'm going to try and make another version of that. And that film is...
Rebecca.
So we have a new version of Rebecca starring Armie Hammer stepping into Laurence Olivier's shoes and Lily James stepping into... Hang on, what was it? It wasn't Vivian Leigh, it was the other one.
It was Joan Fontaine.
Joan Fontaine, yes.
She was the second Mrs. De Winter.
Yes.
Laurence Olivier was Maxim De Winter.
Yes.
And Judith Anderson was Mrs. Danvers in the Hitchcock film.
And now it's Kristin Scott Thomas, isn't it?
Kristin Scott Thomas is Mrs. Danvers.
Yeah, okay, bang on. I'm there. I am there for that. So tell us what did you think about this version?
They are up against some big guns. I think
they are.
I think you have to separate, I think, the different incarnations of Rebecca, because you've got the book and then you've got the Hitchcock film and then you've got sort of the different interpretations since then. So for me, the definitive film version has always been the Hitchcock film, but it is different to the book.
Mm-hmm.
There are some essential differences that they've had to do to accommodate the 40s cinema that are just not in the book.
Yeah.
And so I would say kudos to this version in that it's more or less, it's gone back to the source material, it's gone back to the book.
Yeah.
And so there's some so if you'd only known the Hitchcock film, you go, hang on, that's not right. They've changed that. Like, well, no. They've gone back to the book as a source material. So in that way, I say, yeah, kudos to them, because they have gone back to the source material. They've said, I'm going to adapt this book as if it's never been made into a film before.
All right.
Even though I've personally seen 5 different versions of Rebecca over the years. So saying that, anyway, the story is a young girl. She's only supposed to be 19, so I think she's probably been aged up a little bit by Lily James. She's not 19. So anyway, young girl, she's acting as a paid ladies' companion for this most ghastly American, Mrs. Van Hopper, who is having a summer holiday in Monte Carlo. And it's whilst in Monte Carlo that our nameless heroine is basically her dog's body. She does all her errands. She does everything, that a paid companion would do. And staying at this hotel is the mysterious Maxim de Winter, who has recently been bereaved. He's lost his wife, and he is seeking solaces in the flesh pots of Europe by just
the flesh pots.
That's what they used to call it in the 1930s. The flesh pots of Europe. Yeah, that's where the decadent wealthy would go to sort of, spend their time.
I love talking to you, Sharon. I learn something every day. Flesh pots. So
this is 1930s Monte Carlo. So it's at the height of its glamour.
Yes.
If you're in Monte Carlo, then you are wealthy.
Yep.
You are the sort of bright young things of the day.
Yep.
And then in comes this Maxim de Winter, who's a widower. He's 42. He's fabulously wealthy. He owns this amazing house in the British countryside in Cornwall called Mandalay.
Yep.
And whilst in Monte Carlo, they stumble upon each other. They make their acquaintance with each other, and they fall in love. Maxim de Winter falls in love with this shy young girl who is the absolute opposite of everything that his former wife was. And in a rash moment, what everyone else calls it a rash moment of madness, instead of her going back to New York with her employer, with Mrs. Van Hopper, he says, marry me. I'm asking you to marry me, little fool, is the famous line from the book. And he marries her out of hand, and then he takes her back to his ancestral home in Mandalay. And there it is. The house is run by the housekeeper, Mrs. Danvers, who was the favourite of the previous Mrs. de Winter, whose name is Rebecca. And Rebecca, that's why her name is the name of the book, because you never see Rebecca. She's dead. She died before the book was made, but her presence fills every room in the house.
Yeah.
Her presence is on every page of the book. It's Rebecca, Rebecca, Rebecca. So you never know the name of his second wife. Her name is just insignificant because it's all about Rebecca.
Yeah.
And so she goes into this house, which is inhabited by his former wife in all intents and purposes. And then, things start to happen.
Yeah.
and her life, it seemingly unravels. And then a big reveal comes, which is seemingly is the end of all of her hopes and dreams.
Yeah.
And then it's how she reacts to this big reveal that defines the story.
Okay.
Does it break her or does it make her?
Oh, okay. So, all right. So we have all that. So we now have all these hardy fools who have come in and decided to try and remake a classic. So,
yes.
Yeah, Ben Wheatley, director, Armie Hammer as Maxim de Winter, Lily James as Nameless, Kristin Scott Thomas as Mrs. Danvers. How did they do?
I think they did really well to a certain point.
Oh.
But I thought they were very good
point.
in that the bit that Hitchcock dodged in the film, the film from 1939, they put it in. So there was no fudging that. It involved Rebecca, a key element with Rebecca. They didn't dodge it. There was no escaping it. There's no fudging that. So they dealt with that really, really well. But instead of this being like a psychological drama, like, this sort of this sort of possession in all intents and purposes by Rebecca.
Yeah.
They made this film. It's a love story between this young girl and this older man.
Yeah.
It's like that's what they made this film about, and it's their relationship is the heart of the story. And to me, that isn't what the book is about. That isn't really what the story is about. It's not about this young girl falling in love with this older man. It's about the battle between, you know, these two women.
The specter of this woman who is no longer around, and this one
versus there's a battle between these two. It's not about the men and their lives respectively. It's not really about Maxim. It's about her. She's nameless, but, you know, does she get destroyed by Rebecca, or does she make it? So it's how you interpret the book is how you interpret the film.
Yeah.
And they've interpreted the book one way, and it's become basically love conquers all, you know, not with being a great spoiler. Whereas in the book, I think you could interpret it quite differently.
Ooh.
So it was for interpretation. So I would personally, I think they did a good job. It was entertaining, but to me, it really didn't sort of plunge the depths of where the book really goes. The book can go quite dark.
Yeah.
And I think Hitchcock grasped that darkness, but then he shied away from the ultimate reveal. Whereas this one, they didn't shy away from it, but they more or less, you know, because he loves me, it's all going to be okay. And I don't really think that isn't Daphne Du Maurier.
Okay, for anybody who might wonder why I'm laughing so hard, you should go and search through our archive for the review we did of a film called After. And and you'll understand why I'm laughing when Sharon talks about her reaction to, because he loves me, it's okay. I'm like, anyway, so how many
I think
stars?
It makes them more comfortable. Yeah, I'd give it 3 stars.
3 stars.
3 stars. I think it makes a more comfortable watch in some ways, but The Vicar isn't a comfortable read. It's not a comfortable book. And it shouldn't really be a comfortable film. You shouldn't, when you get to certain points, you shouldn't think, oh, she's going to be all right. You should think, actually, this could go either way. And I never really felt that sense of, actually, this could end her.
Yeah. I
never felt her life was in peril. I never really felt that her sanity was in peril.
Yeah.
I never really felt that sense of danger, where it's absolutely there. Oh. Sorry, I lost
Sorry, Shaun's just knocked the phone over.
I got into the so it's a 3 stars. It's a 3-star film. So it's worth a watch, but don't expect great things.
All right, okay, cool. I'm gonna have to watch that with my wife because she knows the book Rebecca, and so instead of me reading the book, I can just watch the film and she can tell me all the bits that are not right. So. I think with that we come to the end of our little bite-sized version of Netflix Cinema today. Shaun, if you are listening, we hope you're doing well. We hope that appendix area, the whole operation site is going well, and we hope that you've read many, many books. We hope one of them is Rebecca.
I didn't take that one into him, so
we might have to remedy that. And,
we might have to.
Yes, we hope that you're back with us soon. For everybody else who is listening to this, if you can, go be one of 30 people and stay well away from them in a cinema. Watch something, and I think my daughter might be getting to the point of letting me actually leave the house, and when that happens, I too will go to the cinema on a weekend to the Odeon and watch something. Because yes, I think I want to see Pixie, the sort of like Irish
Sonnet Ride.
Yeah, it looks like it's an Irish version of a Guy Ritchie movie. It looks like it's like an Irish Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, or an Irish Snatch, or something like that.
Yeah,
with Olivia Cook in the lead, and Alec Baldwin as an Irish priest. Alec Baldwin.
He's going to be saying Begorra at some point. So.
Well, the thing is, because Alec Baldwin, I mean, they make fun of it in Team America, The World Police. They go, he's the greatest actor in the world. And to be honest with you, Alec Baldwin is awesome. Alec Baldwin is he is good at pretty much almost anything you give Alec Baldwin to do. I remember watching 30 Rock, the TV show 30 Rock, and there's a scene in which he does where in the space of about 2 minutes, he does about 4 or 5 impressions, because he's supposed to be acting like he's supposed to be a conduit for all these different spirits of dead people. And he does about 4 or 5 impressions, and you're like, oh my God, this guy, he is so good.
Good, yeah.
So, and from the trailer for Pixie that I've seen, he does what sounds to me as a non-Irish person, and I know this can end up being insulting. as a passable Irish accent. Like, I have met people who sound like that. He doesn't sound like, your typical American trying to do an Irish accent like Brad Pitt in The Devil's Own, which just goes, no.
Oh, don't do that. Actually, this brings us full circle to where we started our podcast, in that I watched an interview with Alex Baldwin, and he has got some young children, even though he's had a sort of second family later on in his life. And he showed one of his young children a picture of him when he was in Beetlejuice, and they took one look at it and went, "That's not you, Daddy." And he shared this moment on this YouTube interview, and he was like, just thought, it didn't look anything like me. I admit it didn't look anything like me, but they all went, "That's not you, Daddy."
Oh, that is my future. that is my future. I can see it happening now. All right, so until next week, it's a goodbye from me.
And it's a goodbye from me.
And if Shaun was here, I'm pretty sure it would be a goodbye from him too. We will see you next week when hopefully we'll see something else in the cinema. Bye.
Yes.